Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This evening's edition of Truth Is, we're going to be talking about the Constitution versus the Declaration of Independence. I wanted to make this point because I hear this misquoted so many times, and a lot of people don't understand that our rights are inalienable. They cannot take our rights. They can take away their own chains, but this is exactly what the Founding Fathers knew they were going to do. So that's why they wrote the Declaration of Independence first and the Constitution second. And again, I don't want you to just take my word for it. I'm going to include a clip. It's a little long. It's 7 minutes. It's Professor John Eadsmo speaking at one of his lectures, and this is one of the. I have a whole set of his lectures. Again, that's why I studied constitutional law for a little while on my own. But a lot of people don't understand that our rights were not granted by the Constitution. Our rights were granted by the Declaration of Independence. And the Constitution was set into place to control the government to say, hey, you can't take their rights away. You can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. Every single amendment is the same, and I'll go over that later in the video after we watch this clip, and I'll get down and explain some of the details that people don't seem to understand. And I keep trying to say this, they're trying to flip the script on people, and people are missing the point. Our rights are not, you can't take our rights away. They're permanent. You can't take them. Inalienable literally means unable to be removed. Period. They work by your consent. They represent us. They are not our leaders. They are not our kings or gods or any of that thing. They are our representatives. And they run themselves as a representative democracy. But this is a republic. It is not a democracy. It never has been. It never will be. Just like when Trump said this is not a socialist country, it is not a democracy either. And democracy is a failed idea. It never worked in history. Neither did socialism. And a lot of people don't know that there's a video by Rush Limbaugh. Maybe I'll put a link to that in the description below. But let's go ahead and get into this.
Well, the idea was a vassal-lord relationship between the colonies and England. And when in 1775 the Parliament passed a law removing the colonies from the King's protection, the colonists said, okay, the vassal-lord relationship has been ended, England has ended it, we didn't, and therefore we are, of right, free and independent states. And so we see the drafting of the Declaration of Independence. We sometimes say that Thomas Jefferson drafted it, and he was the primary drafter, but it was actually a committee consisting of Jefferson, Ben Franklin, John Adams, Roger Sherman, and Robert Livingston. Now, Congress voted to declare independence on the 2nd of July, 1776. Rhode Island did so earlier, the 4th of May of 76. And they formally adopted the Declaration on the 4th of July of 1776. A brief outline of what the Declaration has to say. It begins by saying that we are free and independent states. We are entitled to separate but equal status among nations. And we are entitled to this, it says, not by any Geneva Conventions or any UN resolution. We are entitled to this by the laws of nature and of nature's God. This declaration doesn't make us independent, but they go on to say a decent respect for the opinions of mankind requires that we should declare the causes which impel us to the separation. And then Jefferson goes on to say, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Some of the basic principles we talked about in the last lecture, that all are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, which include life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that government does not grant these rights, rather government is instituted to secure them, that is, to protect and preserve them. That government derives its just powers from the consent of the governed. You see John Locke's social compact coming in here again. And that government may be altered or abolished if it becomes destructive of these basic principles. But they weren't radicals. They said that just because there's been an abuse or a miscarriage of justice here or there does not justify us in immediately declaring independence. But rather we should do so only after there has been a long train of abuses and usurpations. Well, has there been any long train of abuses and usurpations here? Well, they say there has, and they say to prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. So here is their train of abuses that they cite against England. First, England has refused to assent to necessary colonial laws. England is refusing to let the colonies, in effect, govern. England has dissolved the colonial legislatures, has prevented emigration to the colonies, has made the administration of colonial justice impossible by controlling the judges and refusing to approve laws that the colonial legislatures adopted, has appointed bureaucrats to harass the colonial population, those are my words, but Jefferson's thoughts, has kept standing armies in the colonies which were not subject to the control of the colonial governments, has cut off colonial trade with the rest of the world, has engaged in taxation without representation, has denied people the right to trial by jury, has been transporting colonists for trial in England rather than in the locality where the crime may have been committed, has abrogated English common law in Canada, which may set a precedent for doing the same here, has abolished the colonial charters in many cases, has taken colonists captive on the high seas in violation of what the colonists perceived to be the law of nations, has incited insurrection among the colonists and Indian warfare against the colonists, and so they conclude that King George is therefore unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Notice that they don't say that monarchy is in and of itself wrong. Some of the people at the Continental Congress in 1776 would have believed that there is no such thing as a good king, and that monarchy is of its very nature wrong. But in 1776, Americans as a whole probably had not reached that kind of a consensus. By 1787, it was different. But in 1776, people simply said that George, by his actions, has demonstrated that he is a tyrannical king. Not that the very idea of kingship itself is wrong. Many people in America wanted a king. In fact, many wanted George Washington to be king. And then the colonists say, before we declare independence, we've got a need to resolve things. Look at Daniel chapter 1, where we see how Daniel tries to resolve his disputes with the Babylonian authorities there, and does so successfully in that instance. And so they say, we have presented our grievances to the king, we have sent representatives, we've sent the olive branch petition. All of these things have gone unheeded, And so they simply declare what they say has become established fact, that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. And so they close them with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, and to those ends they pledge their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. The relationship between the Declaration and the Constitution, I think, needs to be spelled out here. We'll see that the preamble of the Constitution is very short. It is the Declaration that sets forth the basic ideals of the nation, and I would say the Declaration is the true preamble of the Constitution. There are those who say that the Declaration is a radical, visionary document with lofty ideals like life, liberty, property, and equality, but that by 1787 the reactionaries had taken over, and they drafted a self-serving document that was simply designed to preserve the interests of the ruling classes. I think that's nonsense. In fact, it's interesting to see that rich and poor alike benefited from the stability that the Constitution provided. That rural states and more urban and commercialized states alike supported the Constitution. And so I don't think that's a fair assessment. Assessment comes largely from Charles Beard in his economic interpretation of the Constitution back about 1900, a view that many have accepted for the last decades, but which I think has been quite well refuted. The best way to understand it is that the Declaration is the preamble to the Constitution. It sets forth the basic ideals of the nation. The Constitution sets forth a practical means by which those ideals can be realized in a society of imperfect people such as we live in today.
Just a quick analogy here, and you'll understand after I get done telling the story. A father gives two kids each a toy. And one kid, he's not satisfied with his toy. He tears his toy up. And then he looks at the other kid and says, I want your toy. He's going to take your toy. Then what happens if you let that other kid get the toy? Then he tears it up too, you see. So the point of the story is the first kid who tore up his toy was your government. The toy he tore up was the Constitution. The second kid is we the people. And they have the Declaration of Independence, okay? You do not have to surrender your rights. You do not have to say your rights are they can sign your rights away with a piece of paper. No piece of paper can sign away your rights. Your rights were God-given, inalienable, okay? That's what they understood. That's what they declared in the Declaration of Independence. Whether people keep not understanding this, the Constitution was written to control the government. Period. That's exactly what everything I keep trying to tell patriots, and they go, well, I believe in our Second Amendment rights. No, you don't, because your rights are inalienable. You believe in your Declaration of Rights, that you have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which allows you to protect that life, even if it is with guns. Now you look at Article 1 here. First thing, Congress shall make no law. So, again, every amendment says the government shall not infringe. The government shall not do this. A government shall not do that. Everything, they shall afford you a speedy trial. You see, every single amendment tells them what they can or cannot do, what they shall or shall not do. It doesn't say Johnny has the right to own an AK-47. No, your right is already declared God-given, inalienable. They can't tell you you can't. As a matter of fact, most of the laws they have to guns are really unconstitutional already. So you surrendering your rights, that's purely on you. If you want to surrender, please don't be on my side, because I'm not willing to surrender my freedom for someone to sign a piece of paper and say, "Oh, I can take it away." No, they don't have that right. They don't have that authority. As a matter of fact, when they try to have that authority, you have the right to remove them from power. And not only that, it's your right and your duty to remove them from power should they break the chains of the Constitution. Let me explain that again. They don't have the right to break the chains of the Constitution. That was the line in the sand the founding fathers drew that said, if they do this, you know they're despotic and they need to be removed. Okay? That was where everybody's too scared of dying, but what are you going to do? These people are becoming despotic so fast that if you don't do something, they're going to come for you anyway. So you're going to have to make a choice between what are you going to do? Stand and fight, or are you going to die groveling on your knees? That's the truth. You're going to do one or the other. So why would you let them have it their way when they're not doing what was set forth for them to do in the first place? In the ruling of SCOTUS Judge John Marshall, Marbury versus Madison, John Marshall ruled that any law, according to Article 6 of the Constitution, the Supremacy Clause, that any laws that were repugnant to the Constitution were null and void. And any judge or any other official or person who continually makes laws that were repugnant to the Constitution were also subject to judicial review. So this has been a major problem in the United States as well, is that we've allowed all these laws that really are repugnant to the Constitution to be passed. All these amendments passed the first 10 were the Bill of Rights. So all the amendments past that, if we can go back and look and say, well, this is really against the Constitution as the way it was originally meant, we can actually null and void those, because technically, if they're repugnant to the first Constitution, then they failed to uphold their end of judicial review and did not say, okay, well, this is wrong. We can't do this. So, again, our rights are inalienable, however you want to say it. They cannot be removed. We have the right to protect our life. What good is it to have the pursuit of happiness if you don't have a life? See, you're not going to be alive. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Get it? So if you don't have liberty, you can't pursue happiness. If you don't have life, you can't have liberty, obviously. So all those three things go together. You can't have one without the other. I mean, that doesn't work like that. So people need to wake up and understand that the longer you stand by and let these people usurp all their power from us, which they're only supposed to operate again out of our consent. They're not our leaders. They're our representatives. And so they've given themselves too much power. That's the point. And they have become despotic. So the time is when people are going to stop being cowards, stand up and fight while you still can, and do something. And I don't mean necessarily fight. I mean just say, let's just make our voices be heard. Let's, let people hear what we have to say. Because I don't care what side you're on, left or right, your rights are the same. And if they're going to take them away, then you ain't going to have those rights. And that includes the ones on the left who too stupid to understand that they're going to lose their rights too. Democracy is a failed idea. It failed in the BCs. It destroyed two civilizations. The founding fathers never wanted democracy here. They make it perfectly clear if you ever understood and studied. So you have to study the Federalist Papers. You can't just read them. You have to study them. When you study them, then you'll understand that they have wanted nothing to do with democracy in the United States of America. So all these people who keep saying our democracy, no, this is not a democracy. Stand up, say the Pledge of Allegiance again. And to this republic for which we stand, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You do not say democracy. It's nowhere where you find that word in the founding document. So to allow this whole thing, again, to continue, it's your fault if you let it. It's your fault because you have the right. You have the duty to stop this. It just takes everyone to stand up and say, enough is enough. You know what I'm saying? Enough is enough. So, with that being said, have a good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And if I missed anything, I'll pick it up in the next video. Take care. Have a good night.